Well, first of all, thank you for making time to interview. Happy to contribute whatever I can with your program. My name is Mike Carson. I'm a archaeologist. I'm a professor of archaeology at the Micronesian Area Research Center at the University of Guam. And specifically in Guam, I've been working at the Ritidian site in Guam National Wildlife Refuge for about 20 years now, since 2005. And very happy that we can continue to make new discoveries, not only from new excavation work, but also from examining in more detail with the artifacts and findings from prior years
Mhm.
that can give us new information and new insights and point us in directions of asking questions that we might not have asked before.
And that's what happened with this new study. Is that right? They looked at previously excavated artifacts. Can you tell us a little bit more about that research and then the study itself?
Yes, yes. So the site complex is very large. In Guam National Wildlife Refuge, the Ritidian or Latexan site, many different components and aspects that go all the way back to the time when people first were living in the islands and in this region of the remote Pacific. So you can address almost any question you want within that scope. The excavations that I performed, started, as I said, in 2005, continued mostly through about 2016, and then a little bit more 2022 and 2023.
Mhm.
This latest study that was published in Science Advances was about a very particular kind of study,
Mhm.
looking at something that we call phytoliths, which are the hard, durable parts of plants that absorb silica materials into them. So it's like microscopic fossils,
Mhm.
essentially, that show you exactly what this organism looked like. And under the microscope, you can see individual structures that can identify not only the species, but the subspecies, were things domesticated or not, and so on. In this case, we were very interested in what is the oldest rice or domesticated rice specifically in Guam and the Mariana Islands. For the longest time, myself included, archaeologists thinking it probably is a recent introduction. The only evidence we have so far is fairly late in the sequence. About 1,000 years ago, maybe is the oldest. And Guam and the Marianas were the only islands in the remote Pacific where during the 1500s and 1600s, outside explorers were saying this is the only place with rice. No other place has rice. Chamorro traditions mention rice in a very narrow context of ceremonial acts and ritual events for uh, like certain like once in a lifetime kind of events when someone is sick and dying or something similar to that. That's not the only context. And so we thought, well, we want to know what's the oldest, and as archaeologists looking in chronological order, you start at the beginning. So I felt, let's look at these earliest sites. There's several of them in Guam, Tinian, and Saipan that date back to this earliest period. And we were not finding rice. We were doing the usual ways of looking at things for what I mentioned about phytoliths, as well as looking in just the soil itself and other things, just not finding rice anywhere in any form. And eventually thought, well, why don't we look at these ritual cave areas at the Latexan site or Ritidian site in Guam? Because that's one of the only, not one of, it's the only earliest site that has cave deposits. The other early cave deposits mostly were damaged or destroyed during or after World War II. So you just don't find that earliest evidence. And yeah, as it turned out, that was the right thing to do because this one cave, not all of the ritual caves, just this one at Ritidian included the evidence of rice phytoliths, and not just a few, many of these rice phytoliths, specifically of the rice husk and the rice leaf that were not in the pottery. They're adhering on to the surfaces of the broken pottery. So it's something to do with the use of it, not the manufacture of the pottery, but rather the use of the pottery. And then we looked at the soil, the natural, sediments in soil. No rice evidence at all. Looked at the stone tools, the shell debris, other things. Again, no rice whatsoever. It's only on the pottery, at surfaces and nothing else, and not in any of the other places of this earliest date. So it's like only in this narrow context. So we thought, okay, now we're on to something, trying to understand what was happening during that earliest period. The One of the implications is that uh, these earliest islanders brought rice with them. And it must have come from somewhere, right? Just like the people must have come from somewhere overseas and brought that rice to Guam and the Marianas at that earliest time. The intention may have been as a staple food, but it just did not catch on. We don't have rice fields in Guam until much later historical times. We do not have rice harvesting tools and other things that you expect along with rice agriculture as a staple food in a society. So it's clearly something for a narrow context, something specialized that is not daily habitation and residential life and daily diet. And all of those ideas fit with our findings. So it sort of gives us a new hypothesis about the role of rice, maybe not intentionally at first, but becoming something unique in Guam and the Marianas that you just did not see anywhere else in the Pacific. So that's the major finding put together. And I know I talked about many different points there, but all of those things are what makes this research exciting to us and gives us some new directions where we can go next.
And so your role in this was to provide those artifacts to, because the other
Yes, yes.
researchers are coming from Australia, and there was some work done in China, I understand.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we all have been working together for years,
Ah,
looking for ancient rice in the Pacific, and specifically in the Marianas, as well as other things, looking at what are the connections of pottery forms and styles. But again, our shared interest is this earliest period when people first were in the islands. So we have been working together since what about 2011, 2012,
hmm.
in different capacities. And then the technology for looking at these rice phytoliths advanced very much around 2015 to 2016. So we were looking more intensively since then. And only now that we have come to this point with the findings and being able to validate and authenticate everything in so much detail.
So would you say now that this sort of avenue of research is concluded and you're going to look at others?
At this stage, yes, you're correct. At this stage, we feel like we did what we can with this one part
Mhm.
about earliest rice in these sites. Now, based on what we did find, we can start exploring other things, such as are there other plants that went along with rice that help give us a broader picture. And indeed, we were finding other things, other starch grains, other kinds of phytoliths, other pieces of ancient plant materials, yet without the what we would call a diagnostic marker to identify a species or subspecies of those plants. So we would need more work looking at things like the cycads, the fadang, and others in the region, obtaining samples directly of the modern reference, doing things with them like processing into the foods that people would be using, because that modifies the structure of the starch grains and so on, and then analyzing those under microscope to create a baseline reference so we know how to identify these things. That kind of work varies from one place to another place. So if you do it in Guam with one area, then it may not be applicable to other parts of the Pacific or other parts of the world. For those reasons, researchers are slow to develop that kind of baseline reference. But we could start to do that because we do see the very high potential in that.
And so, having worked at the Liechtenstein site for a while now, is there anything new or other avenues of research that you're exploring that we should know about, that you can talk about at this time?
Uh, yeah, at the Texan site, but the most rewarding part of working there is working with the people who lead the guided tours, whether they're doing that for the Fish and Wildlife Service or as community volunteers and helping to share information. They ask questions of me about what these sites are, and I share what I can. And then the information has a life of its own, interpreted through the perspectives of the people who were there every day, caring about it so much, and translating the information in a way that becomes important for people's lives. And so to me, that's really the key focus now is making sure this information is available. That's one of the reasons we make everything available online, make it free access so people can access not just the scientific content, but also the breakdown of the individual findings, all the supporting evidence, everything that goes into these studies, so that we're not hiding anything,
Mhm.
and people can access if they want to do so. You asked, is there other new things we're doing? Right now, we are looking more into the material science of the pottery, the earliest pottery of the region, looking at what kinds of raw materials were available for people to use. The short answer is yes, of course, people are using local clays for making pottery, but different sources were available during the earlier periods than were available later, just based on how the landscape has changed and the accessibility of these clay resources. And also with population increase and just natural everywhere in the world, there's more through time, there's more people living in different places. And if people are becoming more fixed in their territories, and villages, then access may become limited from one community to another, and therefore, through time, in this very long-term perspective of thousands of years, then the access to different pottery clays and other raw materials would change through time. We expect it to change. So what we want to do is start at the beginning and find out what it was then, and then take us in a chronological order of the story of what happened. So want to do it in that fashion. The Texan site is one of the few places where you can do that, where you have the complete sequence all in one place. So we would like to do that. The other thing many people in Guam would say is, well, there is no obvious clay source in that area in northern Guam, where the surrounding landscape is limestone and you don't have the deep clay deposits, which is true. So that actually makes it a little more interesting for that to be one of the pilot places for this kind of study, and then start expanding to the other places where we have similar kinds of sequences.
So the study referenced the pottery and called it Mariana's Red,
Yes.
which I thought was interesting, and I did a little research on that, just a little bit. Is that Mariana's Red, and what Guampedia said was called Mariana's Redware at one time? Is
Yeah.
that the oldest examples of pottery that ancient Chamorros used?
Yeah, yes, yes. Now, the definition of what is Mariana Shred has changed over the
Mm.
last decades. Right? The original proposition was in the 1950s, where very little was known about it. So, just in a generic sense, Mariana's Red. Since then, we have so many subdivisions of time periods now. Like we could specify a few hundred years, and then another few hundred years, and another few hundred years. So we have many, many time periods in the archaeology chronology of Guam and the Marianas. So the Marianas Red or Marianas Redware occurs over a very long stretch of time of many time periods. So it means different things
Hmm.
depending on what time period you're referencing. But the short answer, yes, Marianas Red is the earliest pottery of the region. It means pottery made with a red slip on the exterior of it.
So, what immediately came to mind when I thought about that was the red clay that you see down
Yeah,
south.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I thought, well, could that possibly have been the source of that clay?
Yeah, yes, in a very general sense. That yeah, the it's the local clays of Guam and the Marianas that all have a certain degree of reddishness to
Hmm.
them because of the iron and other minerals that are just naturally in the clay. Some places, if you're in Guam, like along parts of what's now Nimitz Hill area, you look
Hmm.
off to the side, you'll see this bright red,
Yeah.
on there, or in or driving through the south,
Mhm.
especially around Telefofo area, you'll see this, especially like after a rain when the colors are more vibrant, that red color stands out so much. So you can identify many places like that,
Mm.
as well as in Rota and in Tinian as well, and in Saipan, these areas with very high quality clays for making different kinds of pottery. And even in the northern limestone plateau of Guam,
Mm.
you will find these pockets of red clay
Mm.
that can be used for making pottery. The other thing is the more the coastal and marine deposits that are clay or clay-like deposits that can be used for making pottery. But what I should distinguish here is the red clay of the pottery itself, the fabric, right? Like the the prime material of it is different from the red slip. The red slip is
Mm.
something that's a coating over it. So the red slip is made of like a light wash of red material that probably includes this kind of clay, as well as maybe pieces of ochre or hematite or something with even more, intense reddishness to it. That is added as a little coating, thin coating over the
Mm.
pottery. Whereas the original pottery itself is not necessarily red or bright red. It's a certain amount of reddish hue to it no matter what, but it could be more black in color or brownish, the original material. After firing the clay, it tends to become darker depending on how much oxygen was in the fire and so on. But your instincts are correct that those red color clays that you see around Guam are the kinds of places that would have been the sources of this material.
So obviously, you find this all fascinating, and I personally find this all fascinating, the studies and the history and the archaeology of all of it. To the general public, the layperson, though, how do you convey the importance of this research and what you do and other researchers who come to Guam for this kind of work?
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you asked. That's part of our mission at the Micronesian Area Research Center is to share knowledge, right?
Mhm.
And our part of our outlook is that knowledge is meant to be shared and put into the hands of people who want to know about it. So myself and my colleagues working on this latest research, we all agree about sharing everything publicly, making it online, sharing, short videos about it or interviewing with like what we're doing right now, talking with people to get the word out into the public, meeting with the staff and the community volunteers at the Litexan site to help with the guided site tours so this information becomes part of it. All of those things go a long way, toward people accessing and knowing about the information and trusting that if people are interested, then they will find a way to internalize and make it into their own. Not like me or anyone else as a researcher saying, hey, this is important. You really should pay attention to this, because then the natural instinct is to ignore it. So rather, we would just want to say, here's this interesting information, and genuinely, I'm excited about it, and I hope that you are too. Similar to the way a musician will share music, hoping that people like it, and not forcing you to say you must like my new music that I'm giving you, like because nobody wants to listen to that. So in science, I take a similar approach that I am enthusiastic about what I do. I share it, and my partners are the same in our research teams, and we share what we can in different languages that we can as well, and get the word out to people who want to know about it. So I'm grateful that we're doing this interview because people will listen to to this information or read about what you're writing more than who would read a science article, online in a scientific journal. So I'm very happy we can do this together.
Well, I appreciate your time. I think especially for the folks who have left Guam and still, have that very strong connection to the island, and the younger generations who have never been to the island even, but still you can see in all these
Yeah.
Facebook book groups the interest in the homeland. I think this, as maybe esoteric and far removed, both geographically and chronologically in our lives, it just gives, I think, Chamorros a sense of where they came from, that
Yeah.
gives a stronger connection to the island. So
Mhm.
really appreciate the work that you've been doing and thank you for taking the time to share it with us.
Oh, I'm just glad that I have an opportunity to share. So thank you.